I didn't know my life was about to split into before and after until my brother uninvited the man I love from his wedding, like he was removing a stain from a white tablecloth. It happened on a random Tuesday afternoon, right between two work calls, when my phone buzzed and my brother's name lit up the screen. "Hey," David said, too cheerful, the kind of cheer people use when they're about to do something cruel and want it to sound reasonable. I leaned against my kitchen counter, barefoot, staring at the steam rising from my coffee. "What's up?" He cleared his throat. "We've been finalizing the guest list." A tiny pause, the kind that warns you to brace yourself. "And we decided your boyfriend shouldn't come." For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard him. "My boyfriend?" I repeated slower. "Jasper?" "Yes," he said. "It's not personal, Michelle. It's just the wedding is going to be a sophisticated affair." Sophisticated. That word landed in my chest like a coin dropped into cold water. I'm Michelle, 29, and I've been with Jasper, 26, for 2 years. He's Puerto Rican, he teaches kindergarten, and on weekends he coaches youth soccer. He laughs with his whole body, loud, real, impossible to fake. He's the guy who remembers my aunt's arthritis and brings her heat patches without being asked. The guy who kneels on the floor to talk to kids like they matter. The guy who makes my family gatherings warmer just by showing up. And my brother, David, 32, is the opposite kind of energy now. Polished, controlled, always scanning the room like it's a courtroom. He's marrying Sarah, 28, a lawyer like him. And ever since Sarah entered the picture, it's like David started measuring people by how quietly they fit into a photo. I heard myself ask, "So you're uninviting Jasper because he's too loud?" David exhaled, annoyed, almost offended that I'd used such an ugly word. "It's not about loud, it's about being appropriate." Appropriate. My hands started shaking, and I curled my fingers around my mug so he wouldn't hear it in my voice. "Okay," I said very calmly, "then I'm not coming either." The silence on the other end was long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a wedding guest list. This was a test. Before all of this turned into phone calls, accusations, and family members checking in with voices that sounded like judgment wrapped in concern, my life was simple in the best way. I work in a steady corporate role, nothing glamorous, but I'm good at it. I'm the kind of woman who color codes her calendar, drinks the same coffee every morning, and likes predictability because it keeps my anxiety quiet. Jasper is the opposite. He's sunlight. He walks into a room and kids gravitate toward him like he's a magnet. Even adults do, if they're the kind of adults who still remember how to be human. I met him at a community fundraiser, one of those events I only attended because my coworker begged me and promised there would be cute dogs and free snacks. She wasn't wrong. There were puppies running around in tiny bandanas, and I was halfway to the snack table when I heard Jasper laughing near the raffle booth. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was full-throated, bright, like he didn't care who heard it. I remember thinking, who laughs like that in public? And then I looked closer and realized, someone who isn't constantly afraid of taking up space. He was helping a little boy reach the table, speaking gently, asking about the kid's favorite superhero, like it mattered. When the boy ran off, Jasper turned and caught me staring. He smiled, no hesitation, no performance. "You look like you're judging my laugh," he teased. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I heard myself say, "I think I'm surprised by it." "Good," he said. "People need more surprises." That was Jasper. He made me feel seen in a way that didn't ask me to change, just to breathe. We started dating slowly. No big dramatic sparks, no whirlwind nonsense. Just weeknight tacos, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, and him texting me pictures of the ridiculous art projects his students made. I fell in love with him the way you fall asleep, gradually, and then all at once. My family, though. My family has always loved rules. My parents, Tom, 58, and Linda, 55, own a small accounting firm. They raised my brother and me on politeness, control, and the silent belief that embarrassment is the worst thing that can happen to a person. David thrived in that environment. He was the good kid, the one who never broke curfew, never talked back, never made mistakes you could see. He became a lawyer, married, well, engaged at first, to his college girlfriend, Sarah, who is also a lawyer. They live in a suburb where the lawns look trimmed by anxiety and the neighbors wave like they're doing you a favor. I used to think David and I were close. We weren't best friends, but we had a rhythm. He'd call me after big work wins. I'd show up for his birthdays. We had inside jokes from childhood. Small things that made me feel like no matter how different we were, we still belonged to the same history. Then Jasper entered the picture, and I started noticing something I hadn't wanted to name. At first, my family seemed fine with him. Polite, neutral, smiles that didn't reach their eyes. But there were moments, little micro pauses. The way Sarah would tilt her head when Jasper talked, like she was listening for flaws. The way David would watch Jasper's hands when he gestured, as if movement itself was suspicious. And Jasper tried. He toned down his volume without losing his warmth. He asked my parents about their work. He complimented my mother's cooking, even when it was dry. He remembered names and birthdays, brought thoughtful gifts, offered to help clean up after dinner. Still, the atmosphere around him always felt like he was being graded. Like if he just passed one more invisible test, they'd finally accept him. I didn't realize how long the testing had been happening until the day David called about the wedding and used the word appropriate. Because suddenly every small moment in the last 6 months lined up like evidence. And I understood, with a sick clarity, this wasn't about one wedding. This was about whether my brother, and maybe my parents, believed Jasper belonged in our family at all. Looking back now, I can see the beginning of the fracture. It didn't start with the wedding. It started 6 months earlier at my parents' anniversary dinner. We were at a downtown restaurant. White tablecloths, low lighting, waiters who refilled your water before you realized you were thirsty. The kind of place my parents love, because it signals success without having to say the word out loud. Jasper had just finished telling a story about one of his kindergarten students, a little boy who had struggled for weeks to tie his shoes. He described the moment the kid finally did it on his own. His hands moved as he talked, his voice rising with pride. And when he got the knot right, Jasper said, smiling wide, he looked at me like he'd just conquered Everest. I laughed. My aunt smiled. Even my grandfather leaned forward. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah lean toward David and whisper something. David's jaw tightened slightly. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Later that night, after we'd said goodbye and Jasper had dropped me home, my phone buzzed. It was David. Can you maybe ask Jasper to keep his voice down at family events? He doesn't need to perform. Perform. I stared at the word for a long time before responding. He wasn't performing, he was telling a story. David replied almost instantly. It just feels like he tries too hard to be the center of attention. That was the first time something in me went cold. Because Jasper never tried to be the center of attention. He just existed without shrinking. The second crack came at Easter dinner. Sarah's parents were there, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, polished and impeccably dressed. Her father is a corporate executive. Her mother runs a charity organization that seems to specialize in galas and photographs. Dinner conversation turned to travel. Rebecca, Sarah's younger sister, went on about her semester in France, museums, wine tastings, the culture shock of small apartments in Paris. Jasper waited politely before adding, "Some of my students are from Haiti. A few speak French at home. It's amazing how quickly they pick up English when they feel supported." His voice warmed as he talked about one boy who had written him a thank you note in shaky English. Mrs. Johnson gave a tight smile. "Teaching is such a noble choice," she said carefully, "for people who don't want something too demanding." The air shifted. I saw Jasper's expression flicker, just for a second, but he recovered. "It's exactly what I want," he replied calmly. David didn't defend him. Not then, not later. Instead, on the drive home, David texted me again. "You can't blame Sarah's parents for wanting a certain atmosphere." Atmosphere. Like Jasper was humidity. Then came the wine tasting Sarah organized through her law firm. Everyone spoke in hushed, strategic tones. Conversations floated around billable hours, investments, upcoming promotions. When someone asked Jasper about his job, his face lit up, because that's what happens when you ask someone about something they love. Sarah's boss's wife smiled at him. "It's refreshing," she said. "You're very authentic." But David kept hovering, steering conversations, softly redirecting, monitoring. By the time we left, I could feel Jasper's energy dimmed, not crushed, but contained. In the car, he reached for my hand. "Do you ever feel like I'm too much for them?" he asked gently. My chest tightened. "No," I said immediately, but I hated that he had to ask. The final straw before the wedding happened at my cousin Lisa's engagement barbecue. It was casual, string lights, lawn chairs, karaoke machine in the corner. Jasper was in his element. He brought homemade cookies, helped set up decorations, played catch with the teenagers. My grandfather laughed when Jasper taught him a Spanish phrase. When karaoke started, Jasper sang a song his grandmother used to sing. It wasn't flashy, It was joyful. Everyone clapped. Everyone, except David. After the party, in the parking lot, David cornered me. "He's too much, Michelle," he said flatly. "He doesn't fit." "He fits with everyone but you," I shot back. David exhaled sharply. "You need to decide what matters more, your relationship with your family, or someone who refuses to adapt." That conversation replayed in my mind for weeks. I started watching Jasper at gatherings, wondering if I'd been blind, but all I saw was kindness. And now, with the wedding invitation revoked, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't about volume. It was about control. The actual uninviting didn't happen in person. It happened through a phone call that felt rehearsed. 3 weeks before the wedding, David called me during my lunch break. I was sitting in my car outside my office, engine off, windows cracked, the hum of traffic faint in the background. "Hey," he said, "we need to finalize numbers with the venue." "Okay," I replied cautiously. He didn't waste time. "After discussing it with Sarah, we've decided it would be best if Jasper didn't attend." There it was, calm, clinical. I gripped the steering wheel. "You mean he's not invited?" "It's not personal," David said quickly. "We just want a certain atmosphere. Sarah's colleagues will be there, her boss, her firm partners. It's important." My pulse started climbing. Important that what? That everyone feels comfortable. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Uncomfortable with what? A kindergarten teacher? He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Michelle, this isn't about his job." "It sounds exactly like it is." "It's about social compatibility," he insisted. "He's loud. He draws attention. That's not the tone we're going for." Tone. Like a wedding was a museum exhibit. "Say it clearly," I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. "You think he's embarrassing." Silence. Then, "He doesn't know how to behave in high-level social settings." That sentence did something irreversible inside me. I could almost see Jasper in my mind, kneeling to tie a child's shoe, laughing with my grandfather, bringing cookies to a barbecue. High-level social settings. I swallowed hard. "So the solution is to exclude him?" "We're trying to avoid conflict," David replied. "If you care about him, you wouldn't want to put him somewhere he doesn't fit." My hands were shaking now. I pressed them between my knees to steady them. "You don't get to decide where he fits," I said quietly. "Michelle." No, you don't." He shifted tactics. "You're my sister. I want you there. But this is my wedding. You need to respect that." Respect. The words scraped against my ribs. "And if I don't come?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "I hope you won't make that choice," he said. "Family should come first." There it was. The test. I stared through my windshield at nothing. I could feel heat rising up my neck, the kind that comes when humiliation and anger mix. "If Jasper isn't welcome," I said slowly, "then I'm not coming." He inhaled sharply. "You're really going to miss your only brother's wedding over this?" "I'm not missing it," I replied. "You're choosing to exclude someone I love." "That's dramatic." "No," I said, "it's honest." He went quiet. When he spoke again, his tone had hardened. "I thought you were more practical than this." And that hurt more than the insult. Because growing up, practical meant quiet, agreeable, not rocking the boat. "I'm not negotiating my relationship for your optics," I said. "Think about what you're doing," he warned. "I have," I answered. We hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, Jasper found me sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the wall. He immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked softly, kneeling in front of me. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. Instead, I handed him my phone and summarized the call. He listened without interrupting. His expression didn't change much, but I could see the flicker in his eyes. "Oh," he said finally. "Just that. Oh." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "For what?" he asked gently. "For my family." He shook his head. "You didn't do this." I searched his face. "Are you surprised?" He hesitated. That hesitation broke my heart. "Not really," he admitted. A cold weight settled in my stomach. "You knew." "I felt it," he corrected. "I just didn't want to make it worse by saying it." I reached for his hands. "I told David I'm not going." Jasper's eyes widened. "Michelle." I meant it. He stood up slowly, pacing once before turning back to me. "I don't want you losing your brother because of me." "You're not the reason," I said firmly. "His values are." He looked at me for a long moment, searching for doubt. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "I need to know you're choosing this because you believe it, not because you feel obligated." That question hit deep. I took a slow breath. "I'm choosing you because you treat people with respect, because you're kind, because you don't measure worth in job titles or volume levels." My voice trembled now, not from anger, but from clarity. "If I sit at that wedding without you, I'll be telling everyone, including myself, that what they did is acceptable." Jasper stepped closer and cupped my face gently. "I don't need a wedding to know where I stand with you," he murmured. But I did. Not the wedding. The line. And I had just drawn it. The fallout hadn't started yet. But I could already feel the ground shifting beneath my family. The days after that phone call felt like walking around with a cracked rib. Every breath reminded me something was broken. David didn't call again. Instead, the pressure came from everywhere else. My mother was first. She called the next morning, her voice already trembling before she even said hello. "Michelle, what is this I'm hearing about you not coming to your brother's wedding?" I closed my office door and leaned against it, bracing myself. I told him I won't attend if Jasper isn't invited. There was a long, disappointed sigh. The kind mothers use when they think you're about to ruin something sacred. "Honey, it's just one day," she pleaded. "Can't you separate your relationship from family obligations?" Family obligations. I pinched the bridge of my nose. He's not separating anything. He's excluding someone I love because he thinks Jasper doesn't fit. "It's not about that," she insisted quickly. "It's about keeping the peace with Sarah's family. Weddings are stressful. Emotions run high." "So we punish Jasper to reduce stress?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer that directly. "You know how important appearances are at events like this," she said instead. "David has to think about his future." There it was again. Future. Appearances. Optics. "And what about my future?" I asked. "With someone you all keep treating like he's temporary?" Silence. Then, softly, "You're being stubborn." That word hit harder than I expected. Because stubborn in my family meant unreasonable, emotional, immature. "I'm being consistent," I said. "If Jasper isn't good enough for the wedding, then I'm not good enough either." She started crying. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet, wounded tears. "I can't believe my daughter is choosing a boyfriend over her brother." I swallowed. "I'm choosing respect over control." She hung up soon after that, saying she needed time to process. That evening, my father texted me. "Family events are complicated enough without making statements." Statements. As if my absence would be a political protest. I didn't respond. What hurt the most wasn't the pressure. It was the doubt. Late at night, lying beside Jasper while he slept, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the questions no one else could hear. Am I overreacting? Is this pride? Is one day worth potentially damaging my relationship with my brother forever? I imagined sitting alone at a round table at the reception, watching Sarah glide through the room in white silk, watching David laugh with colleagues who would never know the real reason my seat was empty beside me. And I imagined going home afterward, explaining to Jasper how it went, seeing the quiet acceptance in his eyes. That image made my chest ache. The next day, my phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. "Hi, Michelle," she said in a voice that sounded rehearsed and soft. "I just wanted to talk woman to woman." That phrase alone made my stomach tighten. "I'm listening," I said carefully. "I hope you understand this isn't about disliking Jasper," she began. "He's nice." The hesitation before nice was louder than any insult. "But," I prompted. "But certain environments require a certain level of social awareness," she continued smoothly. "There are subtle cues, dynamics. It's not something everyone grows up learning." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "Are you saying he lacks social skills?" "I'm saying," she replied gently, "that he may not be comfortable in the circles David and I move in." "He's comfortable anywhere he's treated with respect," I said. She exhaled quietly and as if I was missing something obvious. "Michelle, we're building a life together. Networking matters. Reputation matters. We can't afford awkward moments." Awkward. My mind flashed to Jasper laughing at karaoke, teaching my grandfather Spanish words. "What exactly are you afraid of?" I asked. "That he'll draw attention in the wrong way." "There's a wrong way to be joyful?" I asked. "You're being dramatic," she said softly. And suddenly I understood something with sharp clarity. They weren't embarrassed by bad behavior. They were embarrassed by authenticity. The call ended politely. But I felt something in me harden. That night, Jasper sat across from me at our kitchen table. "You've been quiet," he said gently. "I'm thinking," I admitted. He studied my face. "Are you reconsidering?" I shook my head. "I'm grieving," I corrected. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your brother," he said again. "You're not," I whispered. But for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about whether my family's love came with conditions, and whether I was willing to accept those conditions just to keep the peace. I wasn't exploding. I wasn't screaming. But inside, something fundamental was shifting. And I knew this wasn't the end of the conflict. It was just the beginning. 3 days before the wedding, I made it official. I sent David a message. "I love you, but I can't celebrate your marriage while the man I love is excluded from your life. I hope someday we can talk honestly about this. I won't be there." I stared at the screen for a full minute before hitting send. He read it. He didn't respond. The night before the wedding, my parents called together. I could hear the reception music faintly in the background. Chairs being moved, people laughing, Last-minute chaos. "Michelle," my mom said, her voice already fragile, "there's still time." "For what?" I asked softly. "To come tomorrow. Just come alone. Don't make this bigger than it has to be." My father's voice cut in, firmer. "Your absence will cause talk. David already told people you'd be there." "So he lied?" I replied. "He didn't want drama," my dad snapped. "Then he shouldn't have created it." Silence. Then my mom again pleading, "Family is forever." The phrase hit me in the chest. "So is self-respect," I answered quietly. They didn't like that. My dad's tone sharpened. "You're being immature. This is one day." "It's not one day," I said. "It's the message behind it." "And what message are you sending?" he demanded. "That love isn't conditional." The line went very still. Then my father said something that stung more than I expected. "David is married now. His priorities have changed. You need to understand that." Changed. That word echoed, because what they meant was, he's chosen upward. And I was choosing sideways. We hung up without resolution. The wedding day came. Instead of sitting in a church pew pretending everything was fine, Jasper and I drove an hour out of town to a state park. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. The trail was quiet except for birds and the crunch of gravel under our shoes. For a while we walked without talking. Then I said it out loud. "I should be there." Jasper stopped. "Do you want to be?" he asked. I thought about it. About David adjusting his tie. About Sarah walking down the aisle. About my empty seat. "I want a version of him to be getting married," I admitted. "Not this version." Jasper squeezed my hand. "You're allowed to miss your brother and still disagree with him." Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. "I hate that it came to this." "I know," he said softly. "But he didn't ask me to change my mind." That mattered. The fallout started the next day. My Aunt Margaret called first. "The ceremony was beautiful," she said carefully, "but people kept asking where you were." "And what did David say?" "He told everyone you were sick." A bitter laugh escaped me. Margaret hesitated. "There's something else," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. During the reception, I overheard Sarah and her mother. The words that followed felt like someone slowly pulling a thread I'd been trying not to see. "They were relieved Jasper didn't show up," Margaret said. Her mother said, "At least we didn't have to deal with the loud Puerto Rican boyfriend embarrassing us." The world went silent around me. I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen counter to steady myself. "She said that?" I whispered. "Yes," Margaret replied. "And your grandfather heard it too." I closed my eyes. It wasn't about tone. It wasn't about social compatibility. It was about class. And maybe something uglier. 2 days later, my grandfather called. His voice was firm, not fragile. "I need you to know what happened," he said. At the reception, after overhearing the comment, he confronted David directly. "I asked him," my grandfather told me, "is this really about personality, or is it about where that young man comes from?" My chest tightened. "What did David say?" "He got defensive," my grandfather replied. "Said it wasn't about race. Said it was about fitting into certain circles." Circles. He couldn't explain why it only became a problem after Sarah came into the picture. My grandfather paused. Then he said something that made me ashamed. My heart pounded. He said sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good of the family. That includes choosing partners who elevate your position. Elevate, like Jasper was ballast. I felt physically ill. "What did you say?" I asked. I told him I didn't raise my children to measure people by status. My grandfather left the reception early. That night I sat across from Jasper and told him everything. He didn't look shocked. He looked tired. "I figured it wasn't just about volume," he admitted quietly. Anger flared in me. "They think you're beneath them." He shrugged slightly. "I grew up with people thinking that." That hurt more than anything David had said. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I didn't want to be the reason you lost your family." I stood up abruptly and paced. "You're not the reason. Their values are." But inside, something else was rising now. Clarity. This wasn't miscommunication. This was hierarchy. The escalation didn't stop there. David texted me 3 days after the wedding. "I heard you had dinner with Grandpa. I hope you're happy turning family against me." Turning family. As if truth was sabotage. I didn't respond. But the pressure from my parents intensified. "Why are you involving other relatives?" my mother demanded over the phone. "I didn't involve anyone," I said. "They heard what happened." "You're making this worse," my father insisted. "Be the bigger person." "Why is that always me?" I asked quietly. "Because I was easier to bend. Because I wasn't married to power. Because I was supposed to be practical." The conflict was no longer simmering. It was openly dividing the family. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to smooth it over. I was standing still and letting the truth stand beside me. For a while, everything went quiet. No new accusations, no explosive calls, just a tense, humming silence stretched thin across the family. And in that silence, doubt crept in. It hit hardest one Sunday evening when I was alone in our living room. Jasper had gone to a late soccer practice with his kids, and the house felt too still. I scrolled through social media against my better judgment. There they were, wedding photos. Sarah glowing in white, David standing tall beside her, my parents smiling proudly, tables full of polished guests holding champagne flutes. Everyone looked perfect, and I wasn't there. My absence was invisible in the photos, cropped out, edited away. It was like I had never existed in that frame of their lives. That realization stung more than I expected. I set my phone down slowly and pressed my fingers to my temples. Was I too rigid? Could I have just gone? I imagined myself at the reception, smiling politely, avoiding eye contact with Sarah's mother, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, leaving early with a headache and telling Jasper it was fine. Maybe it would have been easier. Maybe. But then another image pushed in, the one I couldn't shake. Jasper sitting at home alone that day, knowing he wasn't wanted. That was the image that hurt more. Still, grief is strange. You can know you made the right decision and still mourn what you lost. I missed my brother. Not the version who talked about social hierarchy and elevation. The boy who used to build blanket forts with me in the living room. The teenager who drove me to my first job interview and waited in the parking lot because I was nervous. That boy felt gone, and I didn't know if he was coming back. The true low point came 2 weeks later. My parents invited me to Sunday dinner. Just us, my mom said. No drama. I almost declined. But a small part of me still hoped. Maybe they'd seen the fallout. Maybe they'd recognized something had gone too far. When I walked into their house, the air felt heavy. David and Sarah were already there. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just us. We sat at the table like strangers pretending to be related. My mother cleared her throat. We need to move forward, she began carefully. David nodded. I'm willing to let this go if you are. Let this go, as if my objection had been a tantrum. I looked at him steadily. Are you apologizing? I asked. His jaw tightened. I don't think an apology is necessary, he said. Something inside me sank. You excluded someone I love, I replied. I made a decision for my wedding, he countered. That's not a crime. It's not a crime, I agreed quietly. But it says something. Sarah jumped in then, her voice controlled. We've all said things we regret, she said. But you've turned this into a moral crusade. I stared at her. You said Jasper didn't belong in your social circle. She folded her hands calmly. Some people are better suited to certain environments. There it was again. Suitability. My father's voice rose, frustration creeping in. Michelle, every family has disagreements. You're choosing to destroy relationships over pride. I felt heat rising in my chest. This isn't pride, I said. It's values. David exhaled sharply. You're being self-righteous. The word hit hard. For a second, I couldn't speak. The room felt smaller, the table between us suddenly enormous. I looked around at the people who had raised me, and I realized something that broke my heart quietly. They didn't think they were wrong. They genuinely believed they were reasonable. That hurt more than if they'd yelled. Because you can argue with anger, you can't argue with conviction. I pushed my chair back slowly. I can't do this, I said. My mother's voice cracked. You're walking away? No, I replied. You are. And I left. That night, I cried in the bathroom so Jasper wouldn't hear. Not because I regretted my choice, but because I finally understood there was no middle ground. You can't negotiate someone's worth. You can't bargain over dignity. I slid down the wall and pressed my hands over my face. I felt alone in a way I hadn't expected, like I had stepped out of my family's orbit permanently. When Jasper found me, he didn't ask questions. He just sat beside me on the floor. I'm tired, I whispered. Of fighting? He asked. Of explaining why basic respect matters. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You don't have to explain it to the right people, he said. That was the first moment I considered something I hadn't wanted to admit. Maybe losing them was the price of keeping myself. And that realization, that this might truly be permanent, was the lowest point of all. The turning point didn't come with shouting. It came quietly, through truth I hadn't even asked for. 2 weeks after that disastrous Sunday dinner, my cousin Lisa called me. Her voice sounded hesitant. Michelle, there's something I should have told you earlier. My chest tightened. About the wedding? Yes. She explained that during the reception, she had overheard Sarah speaking to one of her bridesmaids. I didn't think it was my place to repeat it, Lisa said softly. But after seeing how divided the family is now, you deserve to know. I braced myself. Sarah said she and David had been planning to phase Jasper out for months. My hand froze on the kitchen counter. What do you mean, phase out? She said they were slowly excluding him from events to see if you'd choose family over him, Lisa replied. She laughed about it, said if Jasper felt uncomfortable enough, he might just leave on his own. The room went silent around me. My pulse thudded in my ears. That can't be right, I whispered. I wrote it down after I heard it, Lisa said, because it shocked me. She also mentioned convincing your parents that Jasper wasn't appropriate. The pattern snapped into place like a lock turning. The changed restaurant on my birthday, one that had no vegetarian options, even though Jasper doesn't eat meat. The last-minute scheduling of family game night on the same evening as Jasper's school fundraiser. The way conversations would shift into expensive vacations and elite clubs the moment Jasper joined the table. It hadn't been random. It had been deliberate. That night, I sat across from Jasper and told him what Lisa had shared. He went very still. "I thought so," he said quietly. "You knew?" My voice cracked. "I didn't know for sure," he corrected, "but I felt it. I felt something inside me snap, not in anger, but in clarity. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't social awkwardness. This was strategy. And that changed everything. The next morning, I called David. "We need to talk," I said. We met at a coffee shop near his office. He arrived in a tailored suit, controlled and composed. I didn't waste time. "Did you and Sarah plan to push Jasper out for months?" I asked. His face paled for a split second before he recovered. "That's ridiculous. Lisa overheard Sarah at the reception." His jaw tightened. "Lisa misunderstood." "Then explain it to me." He exhaled slowly. "When you're building a life with someone," he said carefully, "you have to make choices about who fits into that life." "Fits." "There it is again," I said quietly. "Fit." "Michelle, this isn't about cruelty," he insisted. "It's about alignment. Sarah's family has connections, professional networks, social circles that matter." "And Jasper doesn't?" "He's a teacher," David said flatly. The way he said it, like the word itself explained everything, made my stomach drop. "That's not enough for you?" "It's not about enough," he replied. "It's about trajectory, about positioning." "Positioning?" I echoed. "Successful people surround themselves with other successful people," he continued. "It's not personal, it's practical." The cafe noise faded into the background. "So you measure people by their usefulness?" I asked. "You're being emotional, and you're being elitist." He leaned back in his chair. "If you want to waste your potential on someone who can't elevate your status, that's your choice." That sentence ended something in me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just decisively. I stood up. "You're not my competition," I said. "You're my brother, or at least you were." And I walked out. That night, I told my grandfather everything. He listened quietly. Then he said something that shifted the weight in my chest. "Your brother has confused success with superiority," he said calmly. "Those aren't the same thing." I let that sink in. "You can't argue someone into having better values," he continued, "but you can decide what values you'll tolerate in your life." For the first time in weeks, I felt something different from grief. I felt grounded. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't pleading for understanding. I wasn't hoping for apology. I was choosing. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. That was the turning point. I realized I didn't need David to admit he was wrong in order to know I wasn't. And once that clarity settled in, the fear of losing him started to loosen its grip. Because sometimes the loss has already happened, and all you're doing is acknowledging it. After that coffee shop conversation, I stopped chasing resolution. I didn't block David. I didn't send a dramatic final message. I just stopped reaching. And that silence did more damage than any argument ever could. The shift became visible a month later when my grandfather had a mild heart attack. It wasn't life-threatening, but it shook the entire family. Hospitals have a way of stripping away pretense. There's no room for curated reputations when you're standing under fluorescent lights waiting for updates. David and I found ourselves in the same hallway that first night. For a moment, it almost felt normal. We coordinated visiting schedules, took turns speaking with doctors, texted updates to relatives. We were civil, efficient, functional, but not brothers. When Grandpa was discharged and recovering at home, I brought Jasper with me to visit. He carried homemade soup and a stack of large print mystery novels Grandpa loves. As soon as we walked into the house, the temperature dropped. Sarah gave Jasper a tight smile. David barely looked at him. Grandpa, however, lit up. "Ah, the Spanish teacher," he teased. "Kindergarten," Jasper laughed, shaking his hand gently. "But I'll teach you Spanish anytime." The room softened slightly. Jasper sat beside Grandpa, speaking calmly, asking about his recovery, adjusting a pillow without being asked. Watching him there, steady, thoughtful, I felt something firm inside me. This was the man my brother thought was beneath him. After we left, David texted me. It wasn't appropriate to bring him during a medical situation. Family moments should be for family. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "He is my family." David didn't respond. That was the moment I stopped waiting. The real fallout didn't explode, it unraveled. My parents tried to broker peace. "Can't you two just agree to disagree?" my mother asked during one call. "Agree to disagree about what?" I replied. About whether people have value based on their status? She sighed heavily. Why does everything have to be so extreme with you? Because I refuse to blur it into something smaller. My father took a more direct approach. You're making a permanent decision over temporary emotions. No, I said calmly. I'm making a permanent decision over permanent values. That conversation ended with more distance than before. But here's what surprised me. Not everyone sided with David. My Aunt Margaret invited Jasper and me to her daughter's birthday party. You're both welcome, she said firmly. My cousin Lisa continued checking in, sending messages like, you did the right thing. And my grandfather, he became closer to me than ever. We started having Sunday dinners together. Sometimes just the three of us, Jasper, Grandpa, and me. Other times a few supportive relatives joined. At one dinner, Grandpa raised his glass. To teachers, he said warmly, the backbone of society. Jasper blushed. I squeezed his hand under the table. It wasn't a grand public vindication, but it was something deeper. It was alignment. David, meanwhile, doubled down. According to Margaret, he and Sarah told relatives that I had chosen my boyfriend over family. The phrase circulated quietly. I heard it from two different cousins. Each time it felt oddly freeing. Because yes, I had chosen, but not the way they framed it. I had chosen integrity over image, kindness over calculation, love over leverage. The most telling moment came unexpectedly. At a larger, extended family gathering, one I attended without Jasper because he had a school commitment, Sarah made a comment about how some people just aren't built for certain rooms. I didn't react, but my grandfather did. He looked directly at her and said, then perhaps those rooms need better architecture. The table went silent. David changed the subject, but the message hung there. For the first time, it wasn't me defending Jasper. It was someone else naming the problem. And that shifted the narrative more than any argument could. Over time, the family divided into quiet camps. Those who valued social climbing stayed closer to David. Those who valued character gravitated toward me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't hostile. It was simply clear, and clarity is powerful. David never apologized. He never admitted strategy or prejudice, but he stopped pretending I would fold. The invitations to his events became formal and distant. I declined them, without anger, without explanation, just boundaries. And in the absence of my participation, the social pressure lost its target. One evening, sitting on our balcony as the sun dipped low, Jasper turned to me. Do you regret it? He asked gently. Regret what? Drawing the line. I thought about it. About the lost closeness with my brother, about the tension with my parents, about the version of my family that no longer existed. Then I looked at him, at the man who had never asked me to fight for him, only to be honest. No, I said quietly, I don't. Because the truth is, the fallout didn't destroy my life. It refined it. Some relationships cracked under scrutiny. Others strengthened. And the ones that survived? They were real. It's been almost a year now. David and I don't speak. Not dramatically, not with slammed doors or blocked numbers. We just exist in separate orbits. My parents still hope time will heal everything. I've stopped trying to explain that time doesn't fix values. It only reveals them. Jasper was recently accepted into a graduate program to become a reading specialist. When he opened the email, he laughed. Loud, unfiltered, joyful. I cried. Not just because I was proud of him, but because I knew, with absolute certainty, I had chosen a life built on something real. We celebrated with my grandfather at our usual Sunday dinner. He raised his glass again. To people who lift others up, he said, not people who climb over them. Jasper squeezed my knee under the table, and in that small, quiet moment, I felt whole. Sometimes I still think about my brother, about the little girl version of me who followed him everywhere. I don't hate him. I don't even wish him harm. I just don't recognize the man who measures love by leverage. Maybe someday he'll grow beyond that. Maybe he won't. That part isn't mine to control. What I've learned is this. Family isn't proven by blood. It's proven by behavior. Love isn't proven by obligation. It's proven by respect. And self-respect sometimes costs you access to people who don't know how to offer it. Was it painful? Yes. Did it fracture something permanent? Probably. But peace is quieter than approval. And I'd rather build a smaller circle filled with warmth than sit in a grand room where someone I love is treated like a liability. If there's one thing I know now, it's this. When someone shows you that your partner isn't welcome, they're really showing you that your happiness isn't either. And once you see that clearly, you stop negotiating. You choose. I chose love, and I would do it again. If this story made you reflect on your own boundaries, your own relationships, your own lines in the sand, ask yourself one question. Are you protecting peace or protecting appearances? Because those are not the same thing. And choosing the right one can change your life.